my name is Sarah Hartman, and this is my final project for my marriage and family class, fall 2018. And this is my family's oral history. So I decided to interview my grandpa Hartman, which is my grandpa on my father's side, and he really likes to tell our family's origin story. He's the oldest person in our family right now. So the story starts with two Hartman brothers, Franz Joseph and Conrad. They were from Baden-Baden, Germany, and they migrated to the U.S. in 1786. They landed in New York City, which took them about 6 weeks. They settled in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, and established a family and a farm there for a few years. Before too long, the westward expansion continued into the U.S., and so the family's offspring began to move west. As my grandpa always calls it, the Ohio, as it was called in those days, was said to have really fertile land and no hills, which was ideal for farmers. So my great-great-great-great-grandfather Peter, who was the oldest son of Conrad and his wife, decided in the spring of 1831 to join a caravan with another family. And they traveled to the Ohio. The caravan was stocked with clothes, food, and just random household items, and it was pulled by 2 horses. My grandpa always goes into a lot of detail, and he even knows every family member's name and the age that they were at the time. So they arrived on May 10th, 1831 in Chippewa Township, which is in Wayne County, Ohio, and they had been on the road for 25 days. Peter bought 60 acres of land from a man named Hart, who was a Revolutionary War veteran, and Hart had received the land as a payment for his military services. Peter paid him $4 per acre and immediately began his land and farming operations. He eventually had 5 sons and 7 daughters. Eventually, he also bought the land that was across the road from that farm, and he passed that land down to my great-great-great-grandfather Joshua. That farm across the road was the 106-acre farm that my grandpa was born and raised on, which was on Hartman Road in Medina County. Peter died at age 76 in 1880, and his wife died 5 years later. The family that they traveled with on the caravan, they were the Sieberlings, and they became industrialists. They founded the Sieberling Rubber Company in Akron, Ohio, and that company became very prosperous. It was eventually bought out by Goodyear's Tire and Rubber Company. As my grandpa calls them, the Hartman old-timers would joke about how we were only one wagon away from being wealthy. My grandpa also really likes to tell folk tales, and the biggest one for our family is the buried treasure story on the old Newton Hartman farm, which is the farm that my grandpa grew up on. During the War of 1812, American troops were stationed in Erie, Pennsylvania at Fort Wayne, Indiana. The story goes that during the long, hard marching through the wilderness, soldiers began shedding their heavier items because they were getting tired and weak. Even the military payroll was really weighing them down. At the time, they were paid with large coins, and they would keep the coins in tin boxes. So the plan was to secretly bury the money somewhere along the route and then go retrieve it later. The payroll was never recovered, and it was said to have been buried at the knoll between 2 creeks where they come together as a fork. That land eventually was turned into farmland, and the trail was turned into State Route 18. So the mystery of the money remains unknown. It's still a mystery, and however, artifacts and weapons were recovered from the land from the war. My grandpa's dad told him when he was a kid that people would just show up with shovels coming to look for the money. And his dad was told that by his dad, who was told by his dad, so it's just a story that's been carried on through the generations. Unfortunately, the Hartman farm ended up being sold in 1972. My grandpa was actually a professor at Texas A&M until he retired, and another professor there was a historian of the War of 1812, and he actually came up with a plausible map of where the buried treasure could actually be. Nobody ever followed the map or went to try to dig it up, but my grandpa always jokes about how it would be fun as a family to go out there someday and really look for it. There are some other small stories that he likes to tell at the dinner table as well. One of them being that on Christmas, all of the kids' stockings would be filled with one orange, which was a big deal at the time. He would always talk about how his dad would fire a shotgun in the air on New Year's Eve, right when it hit New Year's, and how he was the water boy when he was a kid for all the men that were out working on the farm. Another thing that's been passed down generations are recipes. My family is known for their homemade pies, and everything is always made from scratch, and everything that my grandparents make is always homegrown, and they like to pass that on to us. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about my family's oral history. Thank you.